I just ran across this thing about this token that had gone a little crazy because we were talking about investing last time, and I think I had some stuff up about that. It was just like CyberConnect or something. It's a decentralized social network protocol, but it's up like 300% last week or two, which for any of you guys following crypto, know that's pretty good. Nothing's been moving like that really. We had an AI bump a while back, but like, crypto markets are pretty flat. They tend to follow Bitcoin, and Bitcoin just kind of doing its little accumulation thing. So, but what it really triggered in me, not so much some like, yeah, go buy this token. That's not our style, but just like I was saying to you, what happened? Like the use case for a social network, Web3 seemed to be a match made in heaven. I remember Steam It, did get a little bit of traction. They seem to have a bad token model and they made some early mistakes, but like explain to me, Gav, like why has this not hit yet? It just seems perfect. Like the one thing Web3 should have already accomplished is some sort of relatively thriving social network. I don't get it.
I actually happened to have been CMO contract for, I think it was about 8 months for a crypto focused social network.
So there we go. I didn't even know this about you. Tell me.
Yeah, about a year and a half. Oh no, it must be more by now. 2.5 years ago. Um, I think I have mentioned it. They were funded by one or two uh, wealthy Texans. That's the way that I describe it. And they were libertarian, and they
Oh,
wanted
good
to
stories
have
start that way.
they wanted they wanted to have a social network that was censorship resistant,
Okay.
right? So, and they were including crypto wallets, but but it wasn't a big amount of capital to invest. So it wasn't a big, comprehensive developer team. And all of these things that now we're starting to a little bit even take for granted, like this intelligent AI stuff and the knowledge graphs and the vector databases is relatively new to me. I've only just started hearing about that in the past few months. I don't know if it's was popularized a year or two ago. But the sophistication of data management is becoming a lot more than it was. So anyway, so this group, they were just doing the old centralized stuff. They were trying to fix bugs in a front end. They had a basic back end implementation with like Amazon Web Services and just centralized storage. So I agree with you that the Web3 community has lacked a sophistication of distributed, decentralized social networking. And for some reason, it's just hard to do. You can have IPFS, you can have your content distributed, decentralized. But I guess to fit all of those bits of the piece of the puzzle together, and have something that's unique, it's
Mhm.
not good enough just to say, look, we have a Web3 login, because people are talking on the forums that they want to talk. It's
Right.
not until you get that tipping point amount of people that a new network really becomes attractive to bring on the masses. And that's what the whole industry is struggling with, be it a social network or any other application, is achieving that tipping point amount of people so it becomes attractive, and it like a magnet, it pulls audiences into it instead of us having to convince people by storing their private keys and not putting it in a password manager and all of that stuff. Like, we need to get rid of that. And so we're still in the mud or the soup.
So do you think is it a combination of things? Like, is it that it is still too difficult from a user experience perspective to use Web3, and then therefore there's that? Is it just that it's that hard to get that critical mass of people? Because of course that's a social network we know is all about that. No one wants to be in a social network with 5 people. Not a social network. That's a fucking Telegram group, right? Like that's just nothing. Um, or is it, I wonder because I remember with Steam It, what they got wrong with the incentives, because that took off. I mean, that had tens of thousands of users at one point, is my understanding. I remember being on it. It was kind of like when I first got back into crypto in 2017. It was one of the first things I ran across, and I was actually quite impressed with it. I thought it was very cool and it was a neat model. But I did keep wondering why these certain accounts, whenever they graced my account with their presence and made a comment or a like, I got $100, and everybody else, I got like 3 cents, right? Like, that was, and you came to find out that, that they had a lot of early whales and they were kind of like, their token model was such that they could all just vote each other up. And so, that ruined it, right? So they didn't get the incentives right. But they still keep thinking that there's so, we know that people are tiring of traditional social networks in certain ways, right? They're kind of starting to learn more about how these things influence things like politics and how their data is being exploited and used. And this is just a thing, right? We had the Facebook hearings with Zuckerberg, and he didn't exactly sell it or make anybody feel warm and fuzzy, but like, so it seems like there'd be a groundswell for this. And then as you mentioned too, the censorship stuff, that's been big recently with people saying like, the right's being pushed. Honestly, like how has there not been like a far right social network? It would seem this would be like the fertile ground for those folks.
So this thing that I was working with, it was, let's say it was a far right platform. And then during that time, I remember Trump announced Truth Social.
Ah,
And I don't actually know how well that's doing, but for sure that is going to be a far right kind of social
yeah,
network,
not
right?
well. It's not doing
Uh,
very well. You go with him.
no.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's just so interesting, and because then part of it is your point of the incentives, and we were working on that as well. It just becomes too complicated. We're trying to be too smart. And with Steam, if you are bribing people or if you're incentivizing people with oversized amount of reward, then what they're going to do is just write junk just to
Right,
get the reward. And
right.
then you say, well, okay, we have to modify it so that they have to get a certain amount of likes. They're going to gamify it. They're going to like find a
Hmm.
way around that and get their buddies to come. There'll be a little consortium that click like to get the maximum rewards. People will inevitably game the system as much as they can. So you get too clever, it takes too much effort to do it. And then about the censorship stuff, then Musk buys Twitter and not completely makes it on uncensored, but relatively speaking to what it was, it is
Hmm.
uncensored. It is uncensored. So wow, it's like, and then you need that tipping point. So it's not easy to launch a Web3 social network because there's a lot of factors. Um, and and again, people are confused by it. I think, and this has come up in a couple of conversations. I'm seeing the sentiment of founders and product like chief product officers. They're recognizing that just bigging up the fact of having a blockchain infrastructure doesn't do anything for anyone, right?
No,
It's got to be that you've got to put that side by side the other traditional stuff. So I think there might be three pillars for infrastructure. One is going to be your blockchain smart contracts, which may be useful for particularly payments or Web3 payments, right? Low cost payments, micro payments. There's no credit
right,
card processing transactions, that kind of stuff. And there's a few other, but I think payments is a big use case for blockchain. Um, Part of it is the transparency, if that actually has value within that community. And I'm still skeptical that there's a tremendous amount of reasons why that level, that degree of absolute verified P2P transparency is really justifies the effort that it takes to build it, but it's
right.
there. It's a possibility. So that's one pillar is the blockchain. The second one is just your centralized hosting,
Mhm.
your Amazon Web Services or whatever, cloud computing, and your standard backend tooling frameworks that Web2 companies use. Like, I think that still is now increasingly being recognized as just part and parcel of having a good infrastructure. The third pillar is IPFS or distributed content delivery networks. So
Mm,
you can it, that doesn't depend on blockchain, but blockchain can use it and just store content so it can be distributed. And I see those as three pillars of, I think this is the sentiment that more product people are moving into. Um, so if we say a Web3 social network, what I'm saying is see it as a social network and see it as an opportunity to combine or pick and mix some of the feature benefits of blockchain, Web3, like crypto wallet integrations, plus just get on with it and do back end infrastructure like any other company because best practice is proven, it works. It's not going to fall over all the time if you do it right.
Right.
And then start to take advantage of content delivery networks like IPFS, which is distributed. Theta token or Theta project is a content delivery network. Apparently, they have partnership with Samsung,
Hmm.
and they're doing distributed video CDN, and that's potentially a good project. Not a financial advice token tip, but I do think Theta might be going places.
Mhm.
So there you go. Few reflections. Web3 social network. The Web3 folks, they don't care. The Web3 folks, they're on Twitter.
Right.
They're on they're on Mas they're on Mastodon, they're on the other
Yeah.
stuff already, they're on Reddit, they're having conversations. They're not gonna join a Web3 social network just
Just
because it's
'cause.
Web3.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have wondered that one of the other strengths that I had thought that would be the selling point would be around data. And now I don't think most people still quite understand how much of their data is being captured and what it's being used for and how much money's being made as it's, continuously recycled and resold and repackaged by, because let's face it, all of the Web2 companies, they're just data companies, right? I mean, almost every company in the world now, Apple it's a data company. They just build hardware and software to capture, ever more clever ways to capture more and more of your data. The iPhone, just a way to learn everything about you, right? From your health and your wellness to your shopping to your spending. I mean, God, all of it, social media. But I'd wondered if some of these guys took advantage of this idea of, the blockchain and how much it can capture if you set it up properly and the openness and all, and maybe packaged the entirety of the network's data into a commercial product. Because there are all these data marketplaces where data is being bought and sold every day all over the world. Kind of a gray market. That's something we should probably talk about at some point. Very few people know how that works, but it's actually an unregulated business. It's kind of nifty if you go down that rabbit hole. But hundred billions of dollars in data is bought and sold every day. And I'd always thought, like, maybe if they just did that, package that whole thing up, distributed some of that back into the social network economy, that might help. But it's hard to say. You're right. How much do people really care about some of these things? You don't know. Transparency, again, it sounds great. It's a very sort of ideologically sound concept that makes people feel good about themselves when they say transparency or that they want transparency, but do they really want it? Hard to say in practice. It hasn't been as widespread, but I think that um all of that, the whole conversation we're having though, it pivots around this idea of product market fit, right? Another thing you and I talk about a lot that really has eluded almost all of Web3 outside of Bitcoin. Right. I mean, and it's hard to say if Bitcoin's achieved product market fit. It's not quite a product. It's a commodity. But, if anything's, we'll say if anything's found a real use case, certainly Bitcoin's found a use case around being outside of governmental money. That seems to definitely appeal to people. And then you can't deny the fact that there's still no other way on earth to move $1 billion in 3 minutes, right? It can be done with Bitcoin. It's incredible I mean, incredibly low fees, comparatively speaking. So, how should Web3 companies and all companies really in this new era, be looking at achieving product market fit?
Yeah, I think we were all in a absolute daze in the early stages of the Web3 industry because we were so taken by the promise of this
Mhm.
technology. And I think probably, and VCs are just as guilty as the founders. Like literally, everyone was mass hypnotized
Mhm.
into what this could be. And I'm going to suggest there might be that challenge with AI as well.
Yeah, I
But
was
I
just
think
thinking that.
AI might, in some ways, it kind of starts to have a more an easier approach to finding a product market fit. It's interesting. Um, but yeah, so I think it comes down to ignoring the Web3 technology and just focusing on the problem that you want to solve for a customer.
Mhm.
Whether you call it Web 2 or Web 3, and how you're going to manage your database, whatever. Look at the requirements from a user perspective of what they want to achieve, and then find a way to fulfill that. Whether it's a combination of um, smart contract facilitation for some legit reason. And that's the trouble. The industry tried to find excuses to use blockchain.
Right. I love that, my good friend of mine from college and the, CTO my CTO on my startup, he'd always just say, like, "Guys, block" he was like this blockchain curmudgeon, was quite interesting as a CTO of a Web3 startup. But I loved that because I knew I at least had somebody realistic who wasn't gonna just try to cram the blockchain into the product. But he said, "Listen, blockchain's just a highly specialized database. That's all it is. Like, don't try to make it more than it is, and it's expensive. Practically speaking, it's an expensive database. You don't wanna use it any more than you need it. If you have a unique reason for it, great. That should be worth it. It should justify the cost because you should be able to, make a gangbusters product and charge accordingly and wonderful. But, he sobered me to that, early on. Like, it's not just all blockchain, blockchain, blockchain. How many times can we touch the blockchain? And I mean, it is ridiculous. I mean, I think a lot of us have said this for a while, but I don't know of any other industry except maybe now AI, and that's interesting. If they'll really follow this path, has led with the tech. Web 2 didn't come at us and go, "Oh my god, the TCP IP gates are so fast now. You're gonna love Facebook." "Oh my
Yeah.
god, you cannot believe our MongoDB database on AWS. It's so cool." Like, you have no idea what technology Facebook uses unless you're a techie and you dig deep, right? They've never talked about that public. Hell, Apple doesn't talk about technology in their freaking products. And they're a technology and hardware company, right? Nobody cares. Nobody wants to know how it works, but we still can't crack this. It's like every place I go, I don't know about you, but I've been saying this now ever since I exited that company in 2020. So it's been 3.5 years now of trying to talk to other projects and say, "Look, stop leading with the tech. No one cares. Talk about the product. Talk about how you're going to make people's lives better. Talk about, what problems you're going to solve," like you were just saying. So is Web3 just not a product market fit? I'm gonna come out and say it. Like, is it not for traditional products? Is the only product market fit for Web3 that's realistic so far cryptocurrencies? Why is it taking so long? I mean,
Yeah, so I think very interestingly, I suggested three pillars. I think maybe there is a fourth, and that is very clever data management. And
mm,
this is what I feel like we're just getting to. And I do think with very clever data management, like knowledge graphs and vector databases, and which includes machine learning and AI and large language models and natural language processing and all of this good stuff. I think that is maybe what's going to actually enable the Web3 stuff to be relevant, because
mm,
then it's the data, it's the bots that are wanting to transact with each other across environments, ecosystems.
mm,
So they want to interface via the smart contracts, and
right.
they're going to use tokens to make micropayment transactions across the networks
And
to
that would
exchange
automate the deals
value.
between different bots, right? So you don't have to how could you track all that, right? We're talking about millions and millions of transactions per second at some point, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wow, that's an interesting take. Huh. Maybe that is it. Maybe it's just about like this was the secret sauce that the AI and machine learning elements are really going to be the revival of the Web3 promise, or at least the the tool that makes manifest. So I cut you off there a little bit. I don't know what else you had there, but tell me more about your perception so far as to how AI is doing. Is it leading too much with the tech? Do we know too much about LLMs and all this shit so far? Like, does the
Well,
industry
I
need to back off or what?
we'll have to cliffhanger that one, which is pretty exciting for the folks who are super engaged in the conversation. We'll have to pick this one up next time we talk. Um, but I'm going to suggest that I'm already using a couple of AI tools that really are a game changer for me and my personal
Yeah.
productivity already. So yeah, let's dive into that kind of stuff in our next conversation.